Okay. You see the board?
Yes, all visible.
Okay. Let me know if I go out, my internet goes out and I repeat what I am been saying. So basically I've had these notes on my computer for quite some time, so I thought, it's still very relevant, and it's good for us all to know what I'm about to talk about, what they're really about. So please interact if you have something to share, because I'm sure you all know a bit about them. So I'm going to talk about Alliance Defend and Freedom. Does anybody know who they are?
Sorry, did you say the Lions Defending Freedom or the
Alliance.
Lions? Okay.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this off for 1 minute. Oh no, actually, I'm going to share with Curtis my board work because the camera's not that great. So if Curtis, can you put it on the chat once I've shared it with you?
Yeah, sure thing.
So let me share it. Curtis. So I'll show my board in a minute. But Curtis is going to put the picture of my board work. I've already done it in the chat so you can look at it closer because it's a bit blurred. So basically, Alliance Defend and Freedom. Anyone wants to say anything before I carry on? So they're the largest legal firm on the religious right. They are also a Christian conservative legal non-profit group known as ADF, as I've just said. The work is well known at the Supreme Court, and also we should know them in the movement due to the Supreme Court case that they have been involved in. They used to be called Alliance Defending Freedom, or sorry, Alliance Defence Fund. I've got it at the top of my board so you can see it on the board work if you've now got that picture. But now they're called Alliance Defend and Freedom, and they used to be called Alliance Defence Fund. So I want us to know we know about the new House Speaker in the US, Mike Johnson. I thought it was worth adding him to my notes actually recently when he became House Speaker, due to his connections with ADF. You can see all that. I can't see my screen because the lights are shining on. You can see all that?
The writing's a bit small,
Can you see
Natalie.
See the writing in the far corner?
Yeah. Well, we have the picture on WhatsApp, so people can refer to that.
Okay.
I sent it on WhatsApp.
Here, because they're in. Can you put it in the chat here, please? Because some people are not on the forum on the WhatsApp.
Yeah, just trying to figure out how to do that.
I forwarded it to all the people not on the forum. If anyone hasn't got it, message me.
So I wanted to talk about Mike Johnson and his connections to ADF. And he also worked for First Liberty Institute as an attorney, I think for around 20 years. So there's a few things I want to talk about. I want to talk about Alliance Defend and Freedom, and I want to talk about First Liberty Institute a little bit. So the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, prior to joining Congress in 2017, because he worked as an attorney denouncing gay people and fighting against gay rights and same-sex marriage while working for ADF. So that was his connection there. He staunchly opposes all the latter I've just mentioned. And he, citing his Christian faith, he obviously does that a lot, and his views on liberty. So those two things are connected. He's against a lot of what we say in the movement, our message, and he's all about his faith, Christian faith and liberty. So long before he became a lawmaker, working for ADF, it was quoted it was ABC News quoted that Johnson described homosexuals as sinful and destructive and argued that homosexuality could lead to support paedophilia. And he was also quoted to say in 2003 column in the Louisiana newspaper that there is clearly no right to sodomy in the Constitution. So we can see how serious it is with regards to having Mike Johnson now in power as the House Speaker. Any questions so far? Might be going too fast.
No, makes sense.
Yeah, can you slow down a bit, please?
Sure. We know while
Thank
he
you.
was in Congress, he worked on Trump's legal defense team during his impeachments also. He is part of the MAGA church and is a big supporter of Trump. He's pro-life and he believes in the covenant marriage, which he entered into himself with his wife. Now, I haven't read up much on the covenant marriage, but I think it's a marriage that you can't get out of easily as a Christian. So I might mention that later on. I'll mention a little bit. The covenant marriage is basically a subject was written about in an article. I might have posted it actually in Mother Jones this year. It is said that Johnson believes it is just too easy to get divorced, and he would like to change that. He was quoted to say, in my generation, all we have ever known is the no-fault scheme. Does anyone know what the no-fault scheme is with regards to divorce that Johnson's referring to?
No, not heard of it.
So the no-fault divorce is whereby it allows one party to be able to file or end their marriage without having to prove things like adultery, imprisonment, or domestic abuse. So I think this is the law that they have in America, and there's some states that are trying to reverse that, or have, some have maybe, I'm not sure. These laws were passed in the 60s and 70s, which furthered women's social, financial, and professional independence, as well as their safety. So they're allowed to get divorced without proving it if they're abused or the adultery was committed. Johnson wants to end no-fault divorce, and lately there has been, it's different from the covenant marriage, so don't get confused. You've got covenant marriage and you've got no-fault divorce. So Johnson wants to end no-fault divorce, and lately there has been a push by Texas and Louisiana and Nebraska conservatives to do the same. There are many that have decried it's too lax and it grants women a divorce on a whim. Any questions?
So is he saying that currently the laws are set up to allow anyone to divorce for whatever reason, and he's wanting to change that as a legal requirement?
Yeah.
Have
He basically thinks women get out too easily. And
so have women,
that's what I
sorry,
think is all.
have women
okay.
protested against this?
Well, it's not. I think they have in Texas, Louisiana, and Nebraska, but it's not done away with it yet. It's not overturned yet. But this is. I want you to see what Johnson's all about. He's about the covenant marriage, which is hard to get out of, which is to do with religion. Covenant marriage is to do with religion, and also he's against the worldly situation where people can get divorced very easily without proving it. Does that answer your questions, Idri?
A little, yeah.
Natalie, would you say that that is actually just to restrict women's rights, because mostly women use that divorce? Is that way of divorcing because of abuse and adultery, and basically, so it's basically restricting women's rights
absolutely.
to do. Yeah.
So Johnson wants to end no-fault divorce, and as I said, we've got Texas, Louisiana. Now Johnson's from Louisiana, by the way, and Nebraska, and conservatives want to do the same. And as I said, they think it's a crime because they think it grants women a divorce at a whim. Johnson's opposition to no-fault divorce goes back to 1997 in Louisiana, the state he's from, as I said, that became the first state to pass covenant marriage. A law offering newlyweds a religious-based contract that makes it significantly harder to get a divorce. Other states like Arkansas Arizona followed suit by passing similar laws. So that's the laws that were passed on covenant marriage. And he was involved in that because he was in Congress, I think he was basically a state somebody in Louisiana where he was from. So Louisiana, Arkansas and Arizona followed suit with the covenant marriage. Not the no-fault divorce, that's not come through yet. If Republicans decide more states should end the no-fault divorce, why might that be bad for women? Anyone? I think I was just alluding to it.
Lack of accountability.
Lack of accountability for.
So Susan's just said in the chat, it's along what Debbie said, that so Susan wrote, so women will have to stay in an abusive marriage.
Yeah, it'll be very unsafe. There's something called the Safe Alliance, a Texas nonprofit organization that said those in abusive marriages, especially psychological and emotionally abusive marriage, could become trapped, as this form of abuse is harder to prove. So this is what will happen when we see the no-fault divorce being overturned, if that happens in all states. And imagine finally escaping an abusive husband when you're forced to combat them in court, sometimes for years, to prove that you were abused, to be free of them and to claim what is yours. So this is just going to go into a more abuse towards women. I like what SAT said, that's what they call Safe Alliance Texas. They stated that Mike Johnson, the new US House Speaker, may want to get rid of no-fault divorce, returning to the picket-clad fence reality, which harms women and keeps them locked inside their own homes. The Human Rights Campaign president, in a statement to ABC News, recently called Johnson the most anti-equality speaker in US history. Any comments about Mike Johnson and the no-fault divorce, covenant marriage?
It sounds awful.
Yeah. See how dangerous it is? Okay, so let's get on to what I want to talk about mostly is ADF. So Alliance Defending Freedom was created by a famous evangelicalist, Bill Bright. You probably heard him being spoken about before, who is the founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, and James Dobson Jr., the founder of Focus on the Family. It was said that Bill Bright, the founder, created ADF, didn't like the way society or family was going, and he was opposed to LGBTQ+ rights as states began introducing the first wave of laws prohibiting discrimination based on sexuality. Right there and then, they devised a plan to fight back. Even back then, one of the earlier ADF founders, because there was many, a talk radio pioneer, Marlon Maddox, wrote in his book published that year that Christians should shift to an all-out culture war and build a well-funded, well-trained army of religious rights attorneys to prosecute it. He referred to, obviously, LGBTQ, godless sodomites. The past 3 decades, ADF has become one of the nation's most powerful legal nonprofits. So you see here how they're already planning way back in the 90s that they wanted to have these attorneys to fight a culture war against basically what we call our message. Any questions?
Yeah, so Natalie, just to get you right, so they start in the, as you said, in the early 90s, and they, at least as it initially started, is a pushback against all these civil rights that they're seeing are being passed as to do with LGBTQ rights, I suppose racial rights, women's equality in that era. That's how it started. Am I getting you right?
I will go into it in a minute. The pinpoint, the point that really got their back up. All right, that started them off. If you just wait for me, but you're right in what you said, yeah. So Christine Wagner was made the face of the legal organisation ADF in 2014. There's many founders, but she was made the face in 2014. She's the CEO. The CIO, obviously, is a guy called Michael Farris. He's an interesting guy. Won't go into him right now. Before these two people, the face of ADF was a known lawyer called Alan Sears. While the other three are right-wing evangelicals, Sears is a Catholic, which is interesting. Won't say why. Legislators in 20 states adopted Sears' policy recommendations. Sears has assisted legislators and law enforcement officials from many countries and has spoken before committees of British Parliament and the Vatican. He ran ADF from 1993 to 2017. He was also working with Reagan administration, George W. Bush, and worked in the Department of Justice as an ADF. As ADF goes back to the beginning of that, as I said, it goes back to the beginning of this movement. So he's an interesting guy who worked very close with all that we're dealing with, including the Vatican. But what brought this very successful right-wing legal firm that goes back, as I said, to the 1990s was when the founder watched with growing dismay, he watched secular groups like, for instance, the American Civil Liberties Union, who actually used the courts to ban school prayer, with cases like Lee versus Wiseman, and we'll write them on the board. Advanced abortion rights with Planned Parenthood and Casey, you remember that one. And also at the time when emerging gay rights threatened. The ADF founders' view to upend countries' values. So basically they saw what Curtis was asking, what was it that really got their back up when they wanted to build this organization, was basically it was more about the civil rights and the rights for society, the rights for liberty, of freedom of speech, of not having, basically it was school prayer. It was the case like Lee versus Wiseman that really got their back up. And also the abortion rights that were going on at the time with Planned Parenthood and versus Casey, that case as well.
Natalie?
Yeah.
On the back of that, a question about this ADF is, so the idea, from what I've understood from you, is to integrate this Christian perspective into the laws and etc. How do they, and I guess all others that do that, interpret the First Amendment? Like, so when we look at the Constitution, we say it's a matter of interpretation, not rejection or affirmation. It's how you interpret it. So how do they interpret the First Amendment?
Curtis, I love your questions. If you just wait, I'll probably go into that.
Okay.
If you see on the board, I've got First Amendment,
Okay.
all over the place. Okay.
No problem. Okay.
Well, please remind me if I don't mention it. Okay, we'll go back to it. Good question. ADF have won around 14 to 15 Supreme Court cases. They've done a lot, but they've won about that many in the past 7 years. It was in 2012 that ADF shifted its mission of funding allied attorneys to direct representation of clients through litigation. So that basically means they started taking legal action against cases they started to support up to the Supreme Court. So let's get to the board work. So does anybody remember a Supreme Court case that was won, very important for our movement, to see, in 2014? You should know because you've got it on your picture that I've shared. So it's Burnwell versus Hobby Lobby. What was that about?
You've got it on the picture about contraception.
Yeah.
Was it to do with the women's movement?
What, sorry?
Was it to do with the women's movement?
It was about contraception. So it was about corporations being allowed to opt out of covering contraceptives on the basis of their religious beliefs. Now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote a 35-page dissent on it, on Hobby Lobby, on this issue, as she found it very worrying on where it would all lead. And this was back in 2014, so she had great insight, as we know. Ruth Ginsburg. So that was Hobby Lobby, and that was to do with contraceptives. So right there, 2014, Sunday law, waymark for the priests. We see contraceptives issue and religious. We see religious beliefs. We see the First Amendment as well. We'll go into that in a bit. There was another case in 2014, as you know, it's on the board, I think, on the board, yeah. ADF won a Supreme Court case. I won't go into it. It was called McCollum versus Coakley. It was about buffer zones where they were struck down that were designed to restrict anti-abortion activists. The ruling was a setback for abortion rights groups. So that was in 2014 as well. But I wanted us basically to see the Hobby Lobby one, which was to do with religion and contraceptive. Any question? Okay, moving on.
Natalie, sorry, that one. Can you just clarify? You said was to restrict, which was to restrict anti-abortion activists. So they were, but they won it, did they? So they didn't restrict anti-abortionist activists.
No, they won it. Yeah, the ruling was set back for abortion right groups.
Right. So yeah, so it was in favour of the anti-abortion activists, presumably.
Yeah. So this it's like we think, oh, what caused the backlash there? We've always got some kind of backlash that sends them forward, doesn't it, and makes them really sort of more progressive about, or aggressive, shall I say, about what they want. ADF basically, and with the culture war and everything. Also, ADF in 2014 served on a co-counsel defending the case, but they lost in the Supreme Court. The case was to do with denying same-sex marriage license, and that was with Bishop versus Oklahoma. I haven't put it on the board. And in 2014, ADF won some cases to do with upholding the First Amendment. So at this important waymark, as I said on the line, the priests, we see a lot going on with ADF, and we see, if you start to see a pattern being formed with regards to abortion, religious freedom, First Amendment. So that's what I want us to see. I haven't put it up, but there's a lot more of the waymarks. 2015 was another First Amendment case ADF was involved in. I haven't put it up. 2016 was another. We see a case that was to do with non-church coverage of mandated contraceptives under the Obamacare. And we had a Supreme Court reject 2 cases about the First Amendment claim and ruled in favour of a gay couple who were denied services. So we see things happening, and they're going forward a bit. They're winning a few cases and then they're losing a few. But it gets more progressive in them getting their own way, shall we say. In 2017, many of ADF's attorneys and staff were involved in the Mississippi law that would eventually overturn Roe v. Wade. It was the Pro-Life Gestational Act, AJAC, in 2018. You've got it on your picture there, to prohibit abortion after 15 weeks. So this was in 2017. And this is what led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Natalie,
Yeah.
I just read something interesting about the Hobby Lobby case in 2014, if you don't mind me going back to that one, and how that was the first time that the Supreme Court recognized a corporation, having the claim to religious belief. So previously, you did a presentation on, I think it's called RFRA, the Religious Freedom something. Yeah. And previously, that had been applied to individuals, that an individual can exercise this freedom to their religion and etc. But this is the first time that an organization or an institution could claim that. And I think that brings implications on, how we view institutions or corporations or companies and etc. and whether they can be viewed as individual, like an individual is viewed, or they should be viewed separate to that. And so I guess, how will America deal with institutions and their restrictions can an institution say we are a Christian institution, so we don't allow XYZ, or is it left to the individual? Yeah, I just found that interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, something to think about. So where was I up to? Yeah, so we were up to 2017. I've just talked about the pro-life law that came in, and 2017 there was also a First Amendment case that was won by them. I won't go into that, another one. So we've got First Amendment here as well. Then we've got 2018 Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission. We all remember that. Does anyone want to tell me what that one was about? Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado. So that you've got. Oh, I haven't got it down.
Was that when he refused to make a cake for gay people or something?
That's it. Thanks, Cedra. So yeah, it was a Christian baker that would make wedding cakes. He wouldn't make wedding cakes for a gay couple. I think that case started in 2016 and it came to Supreme Court, I think, in 2018. And it comes in again further down. 2020, we've got the First Amendment here at 2018, like we just mentioned with we see a case with the First Amendment as well at 2018 with Masterpiece Cake Shop and Colorado Civil Rights Commission about basically about free speech and allowed to have religious liberty. And we go to 2019, there's lots of other cases ADF are involved with. There was a case ADF took up with 3 cisgender women that had all complained about being housed in a prison with transgender women. They said it was cruel and unusual punishment. So this case actually did get dropped because the women were no longer incarcerated. But I just wanted to mention that we see trans issue here as 2019. So I wanted to put that one up. And then we've got in 2023, we've got Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Sardinia, which was a free speech case about Jack Phillips, which is the cake shop guy, being asked to make custom cake that symbolized the transition for a male to a female. Phillips declined due to that violate his religious beliefs. So even though this was free speech case, it was about transgender. It was also First Amendment. Any questions? And we've also got there the 303 Creative LLC versus Elena's. Does anyone remember that one? What that was about? It was a website designer. Quite recent, 2023. Even though that even goes back here as well when it first started. So it was Laurie Smith, the owner of 303 Creative LLC website designer. The case was against Elena's. Laurie Smith didn't want to create websites that went against her beliefs. I don't even think there was a website to be created for anyone. I remember not saying that they couldn't find the person to talk to them about it. Yeah. So these things are getting brought up so they can take them to the Supreme Court, and yeah, it's like they're like test cases, but they're very serious. It was also ADF that created the model legislation for the bathroom bills, which bar students using bathrooms that did not correlate with their sex at birth. It seems that, well, it basically seems that ADF wants to enshrine discrimination into law. So the bathroom bills, I think they're way back here, aren't they, in the days. Any questions so far? Okay, so a case in 2023 called the Alliance for the Hippocratic Medicine versus FDA got some traction, as we know. As 2 ADF lawyers asked the federal judge in Texas for a ruling that they knew was a long shot. They asked for a nationwide ban on mifepristone, I'm probably not pronouncing that right. It's the abortion pill used in half abortions in America. As you know, the drug was approved by the FDA, the Food Drug Administration, for more than 20 years under both Democrats and Republicans. So we also see abortion pill here. So there's a bit of a pattern happening. So I thought it was nice to show that. That's why I put it online. In 2023, unanimous panel of the US Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled that the FDA must restore critical safeguards by chemical abortion drugs and disallow their shipment by mail. So we probably all remember that, being on the forum, seeing news about it. So what some people call birth control, ADF calls abortion-induced drugs. So they're trying to stop this. ADF believe that their beliefs on abortion and same-sex marriage should be irrelevant when it comes to the First Amendment. It's all about free speech with them, ADF, while they discriminate. So they're using the First Amendment, Curtis, to guard their religious beliefs with regards to the First Amendment's free speech. It's been stated in the press that...
Sorry, Natalie, please could you repeat that? I never caught that. They're using the First Amendment to what?
I think they're using the First Amendment with when they feel like it, they swap and change. They use it when they want to use their religious beliefs. So we can say what we have a right of free speech when it comes to our religion by not making websites for same-sex couples, or not making the individuals who are Phillips, a masterpiece cake shop, Hobby Lobby. So they use the First Amendment when it suits them to say you can't get involved with you can't stop someone for having their beliefs about religion. They use the First Amendment to help them with that.
Okay.
It's been stated in the press that in court briefs and press releases that ADF repeat mantras such as, tolerance is a two-way street. If we want freedom for ourselves, we must extend it to others. Which is incredible. Obviously, we have seen through the court cases they have won. It is at the price of inequality for others. So their freedom, as we know, is at the price of others' freedom. It's been stated that ADF believed that the Bible wasn't just for the faithful. It was a universal guide for human flourishing, which is strange. They believe that the right to freedom of conscience for the atheist and the religious minority, they believe that that was silenced with school prayer. So remember I said to you, it all began back with school prayer. That's what they didn't like when that started, when people, individuals weren't allowed to pray at schools. It started from there, and then it was all then to do with birth control, abortion, gay rights, same-sex marriage, and it's just going on.
No, maybe it's related to this. It just comes from the statement that you made about they thought and believe that the Bible is not just for believers, it's for everyone. Just to say, what would we think about that concept, in terms of, first of all, we know Israel was a theocracy. Are we going to be a theocracy? Do we not believe, I appreciate, the dispensationalism of the Bible, but do we not believe that too? That the Bible is for everyone? Will our society look like a theocracy on the new earth? I'm just trying to...
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure if I'm coming back with this. This is my own thought about what they mean. Are they meaning here that, are they trying to put their moral stance on everybody, so they want everyone? That's why they say the Bible was universal, because they want the whole world to live by their morals, what had their interpretation of the Bible.
Don't we want the same?
Well, of course, we look at things, when we talk about, like, for example, when we talk about dictatorships and hierarchy, I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at this movement, we have an agenda. Look at this movement, we have an agenda, we have a hierarchy. So I see what you mean, but we we want it. They want that. You're right in that they want everyone to have a moral compass, the way they think, but we also do as well.
I think the difference is force, isn't it, Natalie? They want to legislate it, they want to make it into law, whereas we would say we can't make it law.
It's force, isn't it?
Yeah.
God's not force.
I get I see that, and I see that that's necessary when Jesus, separated, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. But if Israel had done their job, would that ever have been necessary to separate civil life and religious life? Would we just have continued under a theocracy? And if we had, then we would have enforced, Sabbath keeping and had those civil laws intertwined with our religion. I don't know. Would we have carried on?
Would we have had to force it if the world hadn't fallen to sin? Would there be any need for force?
Will there be a need for force in, I'll say, heaven or the new earth, etc.?
I don't think there'll be a need to force. I think it would be those going who want to just do it and do that anyway. It's a choice, it's not force.
But I think it will still be there. So I think the law was there in heaven, for instance, but it didn't have to be enforced until somebody rebelled and pointed it out. And now we've got a problem because there's two sides created. So I think it is going, I guess what you're saying is because of rebellion and sin that all these things go wrong. So people will choose to voluntarily keep the law that's there, but all understanding that we know it's there and not wanting to break it. Would that be fair to say? But there will still be a law, because I think we're seeing there still needs to be boundaries and structure for our benefit. There always has been.
As soon as you have law, though, you have accountability, that if someone steps out of line, there will be repercussions. So as soon as you say there is a law, the implication is that there's punishment if you break the law. I know we'll all sign up to it, but then when someone decides, okay, I'm taking out my signature, the implication is that there's repercussions.
Would you just say choice? I suppose it's still a repercussion, but it's just choice. You don't have to have the repercussion if you choose the right way. But I see what you mean. If you don't want to choose the right way, the punishment's there, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess we just won't choose that to go that way, will we? In heaven, even though we've got the option.
Can I say something, Natalie?
Yeah.
So I remember a quote by Ellen White where she describes the test of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve, as a pledge of allegiance, basically, to God's government, and that if they don't eat from the tree, that means that they have God's protection, and angels come and give Adam and Eve instructions. They teach them how to live. So what I'm thinking is that they could have sinned without eating from the tree of life, of knowledge of good and evil. It's just that if they pledged allegiance to God and they made mistakes, nothing would have happened in terms of like punishment. It was just that God would come to them, angels would come to them and teach them what they needed to learn because they had God's protection. But as soon as they choose to eat from the tree, then that protection is removed and they no longer have a guidance as to how to keep the law. So like in that way, like the law there wouldn't be a punishment for the law, really. There would be consequences, but not necessarily a punishment, unless they remove the pledge of allegiance and they say it's like a statement of their saying, I don't want your protection anymore, and God can't protect them anymore because they don't want that protection. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on that, back of that? Thank you.
And that's exactly what she says about in the serpents in the wilderness, when he lifted up the pole and they had to look at it, that God did not send those serpents as a punishment but of their rebellion, but God withdrew the protection in the wilderness, because the serpents were all around in the wilderness and God had been protecting them all the time on that journey. But when they rebelled so heavily, God just withdrew protection and said, okay, I'm not going to protect you anymore. So the serpents come in and they'll start biting them and they're dying. And then God says, okay, look at the pole now. So again, that's another way some people see that as punishment, but it wasn't punishment, it was consequence of their rebellion and not wanting that protection. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Back when Justice Kennedy from the Supreme Court retired, you might remember that, which was 2018, Christine Wagner, the CEO of ADF, said in a press release, they look forward to the justice that would uphold the original Constitution. We all know this was during the Trump years, and we got Brett Kavanaugh, and we got Amy, what was it, Barrett? Comey, is it? That Trump nominated. So we see that they wanted to go back to a original public meaning of the Constitution. Any questions? Because I'm going to change now subject a little bit, just a little bit. Anything that's you're not sure of that we've talked about?
I think when you said that last bit, Natalie, just to remind everyone about the document that we read, I think by Goldstein, like how did the Constitution become Christian? And I think that's kind of at the root of a lot of this, is whether you believe that originally the Constitution was Christian and America is a Christian nation, as opposed to being a secular government and the separation of church and state. I think that's really important that, you know, Alder taught us about that document and laid that foundation with us so we could see that this is, because I think many of us would think, well, America is Protestant, you know, that whole argument about what Protestantism is, the separation of church and state, it's not having a Christian government, and that many of even the forefathers were not Christian in their attitude, approach to the Constitution.
Right. Okay, thank you. So I want to lastly touch on what was known as the Lemon Test. Now, I've mentioned the Lemon Test before, just briefly, in a study of mine. So it was primarily a test courts used for over 50 years till recently in June 2022 when it was done away with. It was basically analysing claims under the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and whether it had been violated, whether there had been policies or cases had been violated or not. So basically it was a test for whether it would be seen the coming together of church and state. Some say that the Lemon Test hadn't even been upheld for years anyway. And what was in place was that the Establishment Clause, and this must be referred to in historical practices and understanding, so that again they wanted to go back to history and original understanding. So basically they're saying that their understanding has to accord with the history and faithfully reflect the understanding of the founding fathers. So I'm also mentioning this Lemon Test due to Alliance Defending Freedom. They had a long-term goal, as I've said, to undo Roe v. Wade and what was called the Lemon Test. That was brought about by the Supreme Court decision in 1971 due to a case called Lemon versus Kurtzman. I put that on the photograph. So it was a case called Lemon versus Kurtzman. Some government officials wanted to eliminate all things religious from public life. What come from the case was 3 tests that determine whether a particular government act or policy unconstitutionally promotes religion. The Lemon Test said that in order to be constitutional, a policy must, I think I put it on the photograph I've given you, have no religious purpose, not end up promoting or favouring any set of religious beliefs, and not over-involve the government with religion, basically. There should be no church and state. However, as I said, after 50 years, in June 2022, the Supreme Court, in a landmark decision, abandoned the Lemon Test in the case Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. Did I put that there? Yeah, I put that on the photograph. So you might remember this one. So this was the case. It was Bremerton. It was Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. You may remember it. The case sided with a football coach who demanded the right to pray with his players after games at a 50-yard line. He was sacked from his job, by the way, for doing so. So the Supreme Court gave a death blow to the Lemon Test by, church and state in public schools, and existing establishment clause jurisprudence, which prohibits the government from establishing a religion. That's what the Lemon Test was about, helping to prohibit that, the government from establishing a religion. A political control of religion, basically what's in the First Amendment, or the first clause of the Bill of Rights. It says no Congress shall make no law respecting religion. The case was represented, as I said, by ADF. Was not represented by the ADF, but the First Liberty. So at the beginning I mentioned I wanted to talk about Alliance Defending Freedom, and I wanted to talk a little bit about First Liberty Institute. I mentioned them earlier, as I said, and the law firm that I'm talking about, First Liberty Institute, the House Speaker Mike Johnson worked for them as well for about 20 years. So, as I've mentioned, Mike Johnson was against the Lemon Test. Not against it, was probably for it, I think, because it's about, no, it was against it, sorry, because he does want religion in policy, so he was against the Lemon Test. He worked for the law firm as an attorney for 20 years that done away with the Lemon Test at the Supreme Court, the case with Kennedy versus Bremerton. And they were called the First Liberty Institute. Any questions? Because I'm giving a lot of information about this Lemon Test. No questions?
Natalie, have we seen anything since they've done that in 2022? Have we seen any case where they have actually taken advantage of the fact that that's been done away with now? Because that's basically saying the separation of church and state, isn't it, in a nutshell? And now they're saying we're not going to use that Lemon Test anymore. We're not going to separate church and state. Is that in a really simple summary?
Yeah, well, we see 2023. There's cases with regards to 2023. We see cases with regards to do with bringing in, the free speech with regards to religious liberty.
I'm guessing they've been doing that since 2014 because that's what this line is showing. So I'm just wondering what difference it made.
Well, that's why I said that people have upheld that they haven't even been using the Lemon Test for some years because it's been, so you're right in spotting that, and that's why I mentioned that earlier on, that some people have said that they're using the establishment clause in their own way to get what they want. This doesn't really, it's not even relevant. But what I wanted to show was, from the Lemon Test, was the two institutions, the two non-profit organisations that are involved in all this, well, especially ADF are involved in all these Supreme Court cases that are very important to our movement and our message, and also what the subjects are, and also how I wanted to, I'll go into it again at another stage, but I wanted to mention First Liberty Institute regards to what they wanted to get rid of the Lemon Test, because I think they will have more power going forward with regards to religious liberty, because First Institutes of Liberty, they're all about religious freedom, religious liberty. So I just wanted to, at the end of my study, I wanted to just mention briefly the Lemon Test, who done away with it, what case it was. It was about religious freedom on the football, praying and stuff like that, and just connect all that together. ADF, First Liberty Institution, And that's how I brought in the lemon test, because they're involved. Any
Okay.
questions?
Yeah, very helpful.
So I'll just
So
give
just to understand the progression of all of this and where they're coming from, my question at the beginning is how they're using this First Amendment, and to clarify what you responded to me in showing all these examples is they're saying that we as Christians in America, our freedoms and our rights under the First Amendment have been trampled upon for so long because the government is getting involved with our freedom to, you know, pray at school games, our freedom to bake cakes for who we want. So the government is getting involved in our religion. So it's kind of like victim blaming. So now they've said that we're the victims of society. So is that where they're coming from? And they are reversing all the oppression that religious groups feel that they faced.
Yeah, I like the way you said victim blaming.
Mm.
That's the point completely. And they'll talk about the First Amendment rights the way you've just mentioned, and then other times they won't. It's just whatever suits them at the time, and to get their agenda moving forward. But yeah, you're right on the points. Because ADF is defending religious freedom, but basically what they're doing is they're creating freedom to discriminate. That's what their cases are. They're using the First Amendment and their religious freedom to discriminate against minorities.
Do they see it that way though?
Women.
You know,
How do they
I'm asking, like, do they, when they have their policies, say, okay, we want to oppress gay people, we want to oppress racial minority, we want to oppress women? I don't know, but I don't think that they have in their minds, at least for what they're saying, I don't think that that's the position that they are coming from. Obviously, that's what happens, but I don't think that's the intention.
No, because they read the Bible differently, don't they? They read the Constitution differently. They think that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they think, you know, that they are upholding good morals by
Yeah, they're good
defending.
people.
They're doing God's service like the Sanhedrin. We're serving
Yeah,
God
exactly.
faithfully and doing what God wants. And just like we with conservative Christians, we thought this is what God wants. Headship and patriarchy is what God wants. So we're just doing the right thing, what we think is the right thing. And we just want everyone else to do the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. So Christians are under persecution by Satan. You know, Satan is destroying the world by saying that same-sex people can marry each other, by saying that women should be in positions of leadership and etc. and all these things. And so they are restoring the old paths in their eyes.
Yeah, and it's like the SDA Church. They believe they're doing it God's will as well.
Yeah, yeah.
How readest thou? All
I guess
the
that
things
brings the question, how sorry.
No, I finished.
That brings the question, how do we view these people, you know, that are fighting for these things? Do we see them as evil and malicious, or how do we relate to them?
I have empathy. I have pity, but you have to have pity for them, and you have pity for those who they persecute, which will be us, by the way. Eventually. I have empathy for them because they're in darkness.
Interesting.
Anyone else got opinion?
Richard's written in the chat, they sound like MRA, the victims, deceived. That's what it reminded me of when the men make out they're the victim when a woman's taking the man to court over abuse. It's a similar thing. It's a reversal of terms. Darvo, yeah, as well. Men's rights activists there as well, saying that they're the victims because women are too strong now. It's like they're the victims, the Christian victims who are having their rights trampled.
And we should be weeping for these people because they're all on shipwreck. They're on a fast train to nowhere. It's very sad.
I'm just gonna say that would be like a really difficult thing to say, you know. You imagine you as an LGBTQ person, as part of who is LGBTQ AI plus, and you're saying these people don't actually hate you, you know? They're coming from, in their minds, have empathy for them because they're just confused. They're going to feel like these people are evil, you know, or as a woman, you're going to feel, or as a person of color, whatever minority, you're going to feel that the oppressor, the person who's oppressing you, is evil. But now you're telling the oppressed to be like, no, have empathy for them because they're just confused.
Yeah, but didn't Jesus say pray for your enemies? Enemies, love them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm just pointing out, you know, how difficult that can be to hear as an
Yeah, I
oppressed.
know. I know what it's like to be oppressed. So it's very difficult, but we still have to love our enemies and have extra sympathy for the women, for the LGBTQ community, those who are severely suppressed, even killed. Women are dying. LGBTQ people are dying for who they are, who God made them. So it's yeah, Curtis, it's hard. Thank you for your contribution. So if I just summarize, I wanted to show the progressive plan of the right-wing legal organisation ADF and First Liberty Institute that have had religious liberty and anti-equality for women and LGBTQ agenda all the way back to the beginning of our reform line. And they played an important role in the overturning of Roe v. Wade, well, ADF did. The issue with abortion and medication abortion rights. I spoke about the new House Speaker and showed he worked for ADF and he worked also for Liberty Institute and Liberty University as a professor, I have to say as well. He also spoke about I spoke about what his opinions are on no-fault divorce and how he wants it done away with, which would hurt and endanger women in psychological and emotional abusive marriages. I also mentioned he worked for, as I said, Liberty Institute that gave the blow to the Lemon Test in 2022, that prevented church and state, that tested whether a policy was constitutional by having no religious purpose, no set of religious beliefs, and no involvement of the government with religion. So that is it. I'm always early, aren't I, when I go through my study? I have been going, I think, an hour, and I normally only have an hour. Any questions about anything I've said?
Not a question, but I was just typing in the chat and thought might as well just say it. And I just want to clarify, lest I'm misunderstood. That's not to excuse, you know, the behaviors of, you know, someone perpetuating abuse out of ignorance. And it's not always, but in most cases, you know, the religious groups will look to murder and femicide, etc., as abhorrent, but they don't see how their rhetoric leads to those kind of consequences. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that empathy is not empathizing with them at an emotional level to say, oh no, it's okay, carry on, because we all recognize that it's not okay.
Yeah, thank you, Curtis. Can you see the danger of Mike Johnson? Can you see the pattern of ADF? I've started from 2014, but it goes way back. And it's all about, you know, rights of minorities, obviously, but mostly about religion, liberty, abortion, First Amendment, abortion pill, you know, there's a pattern unfolding here. And I just wanted you to see that. If there's no more questions, I will kneel and pray. Shall we pray? Almighty God, we thank you for light from upon heaven that you brought to your people with the Midnight Cry message. We thank you that we are here and we have a chance. We have a chance to be part of the 144,000. We still have much to learn, and with the time is short that is ahead of us, and we pray that we have our house in order, our family in order, our hearts and minds in order, that we see the depth of patriarchy, and we have love for our enemies. Pray that you will continue to pour out your Holy Spirit as this message progresses towards the Sunday law and the close of ADF's history, probation. Thank you for others who have worked endlessly to bring us to this point in our lives. We have different stories individually. We thank them and pray for them. We pray that you will continue to help us be strong with this message too, but also to be gentle, to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. We thank you for this beautiful Sabbath day when we can come together. Please continue to bless us and help us to walk in your ways and to glorify your name in our behaviours and our speech. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yes, thank you, Natalie, for walking us through the different way